Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Redemption Thursdays with Rabbi Pinchas Winston from Telstone, Israel. I am Yehuda Shamroth from the Miriam Project, and Josh Wander, who is not with us tonight because he's in the reserves and the Army and the IDF. He's in and out. Sometimes he's in, and I mean in Gaza, and sometimes he's out. So he's endangering his life like all the other Chayalim to help us keep this country going and keep us safe. We would like you to ask any questions you have on our internet site. We have israeltorah.org, which a lot of you are watching on, and on Facebook Live. So type in some questions in there if you want, and we have the rabbi answer if he has a chance. But also, if you want a time for just a question and answer session alone, we can do that. So tonight we're talking about redemption and me. We're looking very forward to hearing this. Thank you for joining us, Rabbi Winston.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. One of the things as you go deep into Torah, you find out that things you took for granted as being that's the way it is, and the only way that it is, it turns out it's not so necessarily, and that there's a lot more going on. And the amazing thing is how you can read something a particular way. I think that's the only way to understand it. And sometimes you just understand things differently, and it's not the way it was said. But other times it's amazing that you can go back and reread the thing that you thought you understood with a deep understanding, and it means something completely different. One of my rabbis that I learned a lot from, that I was amazing at doing this, was Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg Tzitzal, who was the brother. He was the Rosh Hashiva of Ner Yisrael in Baltimore, and he was the brother of my Rosh Hashiva, Noah Weinberg Tzitzal. And I thoroughly enjoyed listening to him speak. But one of the things I enjoyed so much about the way he spoke was how he could take something very simple that I read and I learned, and again took for granted that's the only way it could be understood, only to find out that the exact same words could mean something so much deeper. And it was good training for the brain, for the mind, and teaching purposes as well. And it certainly is that way as you go from reading a simple pasuk, Rashi, and the other Meforshim on the Chumash and Gemara for that matter, and then looking at Gemara and then looking at the Midrashim, and eventually looking at Kabbalah, and seeing how deep the idea actually goes. And very often people they don't have the right perspective on life, even if they're even if they're Torah observant, that they're living by Torah, doing mitzvahs, they're doing the best they can, but they think they're doing all that has to be done, and they're using all the opportunity that's available to them, but it's not true. Now, it might be true because everyone's different. And you see that some people strive for greatness and they achieve it. Some people strive for greatness and don't achieve it. Some people, they don't even strive at all for greatness. It's not important to them, and they're content with that. So we know already from Shar HaGilgulim, which is the Rizal's work on reincarnation, that different souls have different energies and different koiches, different strengths and weaknesses, and you can have souls that are destined to be great from day one, and they show signs of excellence very early on in life. And you can have also souls that are mediocre, and souls that are just simple people, and it's not that they're lazy, it's not that they're not achievers. It's that's all their soul tells them to do. It's all they feel they need to do. And God, of course, evaluates everybody based upon what they have, not what they don't have. If whatever, you're doing the best you can with what you have. But unfortunately, so many people have a lot more to give, a lot more to accomplish than they actually do. And one of the things that we hear that on Yom Adin, on even the truth is, they say even one day before you die, the day of your death itself, that they show you, I guess, in your mind or whatever, what you were supposed to have been, what you could have been, based upon your koiches, and then you, of course, know what you were. And the difference itself, of course, is going to be very painful because it hurts. Someone says, it's too bad you weren't home today. Why? Because they were trying to reach you, and had you answered the phone, you would have won $35,000. How do you know? I was listening on the radio. They read this talk show, and they mentioned your name and your phone number. They called you, and I heard it ring, and you didn't answer. So they went to the next person who got $35,000, and you're like, what? It's like I could have used that money. So just because I didn't answer because I wasn't home, what a wasted opportunity. And that's pretty much sums up life for billions of people. So we need to know what we're expected to do, what we're capable of doing. That's kind of between you and God, and you and yourself. But just to have a perspective on what is the opportunity itself. And even though this is redemption to me because it's called that, because where do I fit in? Do I just sit back and wait for it to happen? Do I not think about it at all? Do I get it? Do I take a responsibility and try to make things happen in a specific way? What's my role? You see, the history is made of what we call the machers, right? Usually a macher means someone who's very wealthy, gives a lot of money because they can make things happen because they have money, right? But a macher is someone who makes things happen. Just make anybody who you don't have to, it doesn't have to be money only. It can be just that a person is running around doing all kinds of chesed, accomplishing great things because that's what they're driven to do. So we're going to go through some sources here, and they're well-known sources, nothing really outside the box here. Some may be a little Kabbalistic, but most of them are things that we've already read, we've already learned, and we've already seen, but we didn't think about them. We didn't understand them the way they're meant to be understood in the larger picture, the bigger picture. And had we done that, we would see that there are some questions to be asked and answers to be found. So the first one I'm going to just mention right now is when Yosef is in prison. He's in prison for He's in prison for altogether 12 years. Right? He was accused by Eshes Potiphar, and even though Potiphar, her husband, didn't believe her, the Medrash says, nonetheless he had to follow through and make it look like she was right, he was wrong. So he went to jail for 10 years, and at the end of the 10 years, he was excelling in Potiphar's house, and now he's excelling in the jail too. And then the Sar Mashke and the Sar HaOfe, the ministers, the ones responsible for holding, pouring the wine for Pharaoh and holding his cup for him, and the baker, they were thrown in jail for whatever transgressions that they did. Apparently there was a fly found in the wine cup, and the baker by accident had some stones in the flour or whatever, and they ended up in jail. But it was all divine providence. It was all done. They're part of wondering, how is it possible for the fly to get in there? I'm so careful to make sure the flies don't go in there. The baker is going, I don't understand. We've sifted this flour so many times. But Hashem arranged it so that they would be there for Yosef in jail. And they had their dreams, and then Yosef goes to interpret them. And when he's finished interpreting them, first he does the wine steward, because the wine steward asks him first. And he talks about how in 3 days' time, Paro's going to have a birthday. He's going to be taken out. He's going to be free once again. And this is all going to be history in the past for him. A happy ending to this entire episode for the wine steward. And then Yosef adds the words, and he says that listen, when it goes well for you, and they take you out, like I'm telling you, please be sure to remember me. Here it says, remember me when things go well with you, and please do me a favor and mention me to Pharaoh, and you will get me out of this house, prison, really, right? I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and here too I have done nothing wrong, for which they have put me into this dungeon, into the dungeon. That's what he says. He adds these words. And when we see Yosef do this, I mean, one part of this always bothered me regardless, and that was the last part where he adds the words that I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews. And he says basically to this wine steward, bad things happen to good people, which is the reason I thought he spent 2 extra years in jail. The simple reading of the Parsha is that Yosef was only supposed to be in jail for 10 years. That's it. And then come out, and then Paro would have had his dreams and etc., etc. But instead, as Rashi says, because Yosef relied on him, the Egyptian, to remember him, he had to be confined for another 2 years. As it says, praiseworthy is the man who made Havaya, Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, that's the name he uses, his trust, and did not turn to the Hadi, that is, the Egyptians, who are called Hadi. So Rashi's holding that this was not a proper hishtadalus. This was not a proper effort made by Yosef to make something happen. We're expected not to rely upon miracles. And that means doing hishtadalus. And of course, the classic question of all time, everybody always asks, is how much hishtadalus, how much effort, and how much you would let God take care of your situation. It's a very delicate balance. And you don't want to do too much hishtadalus because it's a lack of biktachon. Because the more, it's a continuum, right? So the more hishtadalus you do, the less trust in God you're exercising. Likewise, you don't want to do too much trust in God because that's called relying upon a miracle. And the Gemara says you shouldn't do that because either the miracle won't happen, or if it does happen, it may come off your merits in the world to come, and you don't want that. So this is the ongoing struggle. So Yosef is making shtadalus. That's what we all would have thought without Rashi. And even though the Torah says, he indicates, what's the last one? He indicates the 2 years, actually 2 years, right? We might not have known that Yosef did anything wrong. The parsha flows. You don't hear God get angry and say, because you did that, you're staying 2 more years. Well, let me ask you a question. If Yosef did that, if Yosef made this mistake of relying that this is not called ishtadalus, as far as Hashem is concerned, it's being too much, or it's called ishtadalus, but it's also called too much ishtadalus, and it's the wrong, maybe not so much too much, but the wrong kind of ishtadalus, because you can't just rely on anybody. Just because you need someone's help doesn't mean you can turn to a murderer and ask for, you have to be careful who you turn to, because that's also part of your hishtadalus, to make sure you don't go too low and compromise your values too much just to get what you want. So maybe this is the wrong kind of hishtadalus, which is Rashi seems to be saying. But did Yosef, because of this mistake, cause God to have to redraft his plan for creation and history? Did God say, I really meant to do this after 10 years and everything was going to happen, but now Yosef has made this mistake and I cannot take him out after 10 years. I have to leave him there for another 2 years, 12 years altogether, which means I have 2 years of history to fill up that I didn't expect to fill up, didn't expect it to need. All because Yosef made this mistake. That's the implication. He was supposed to be there for 10 years. He caused God to extend his prison sentence another 2 years, and now it's 12 years later, and the whole thing happens. So it sounds like Yosef forced God's hand to have to adjust history by 2 years. Now, first of all, that's a problem. Aside from the fact that would be incredible, that you have to, that Yosef could cause such a thing in the first place. It's a lot of rearranging and reorganizing for sure. I mean, there's a lot of people's lives are going to be impacted by this, such a change. But more importantly, God is above time. It's not like God said, well, I plan to get him out after 10 years, if everything goes well. Right? And then the following things are going to happen. It's not like God said, but if he happens to make a mistake and do the wrong, can it be shtalus? I have a backup plan of 2 years of things to keep the world busy until we get to the 12 years. God knew already from day one that Yosef was going to do this. So therefore, God already built in the 12. Well, then what is it? That if God meant for Yosef from the beginning to be there for 12 years, so then what's Rashi saying? He didn't do anything wrong. That's just the way it was, that he made that statement and God said, nice try, and you did the right thing, but I want you there for 12 years. So why is Rashi pointing out Yosef's mistake and making it seem like he was supposed to come out after 10 years? Good question. And we'll have to deal with that question as we go along. But that's the first source. That's the first idea. Right? Can Yosef make a mistake in God's, everyone makes mistakes, but every time we do we force God's hand to change history because of our mistake? An accidental killing, right? Well, it's accidental from our perspective, but not from God's perspective. This person was destined to die exactly when they did, at whatever age they were there at the time. The way they died, we don't know. And as far as we're concerned, a person should live a long life, a long, healthy, happy life. But that's a hope. No one ever knows. Even without accidents, there's cancer, God forbid, Rahman Salam, there's all kinds of illnesses, diseases, and who knows? I mean, some people just don't wake up. And it's a terrible, tragic thing, but it's not accidental. God's already seen that from day one. So then what's Yosef's role? And why is Yosef held responsible for what he did? Okay. The next source, right? Moshe returned to God, this week's Parsha, end of the Parsha. Moshe returned to God and said, God, why have you harmed this people? Why have you sent me? Since I have come to Paro, speak in your name, he has harmed this people and you have not saved your people. That's what Moshe complains. What does God do? Does God say, no, I'm sorry about that. I told you anyhow you wouldn't be successful right away. You told me that, but you never told me that by my going down and making a demand to get them out, that the power would increase the slavery. That part we never discussed. And now they hate me. Now they're blaming me. They're all thinking, if you only had, we thought we were going out, fine. If we'd gone out, we'd all be celebrating and you'd be the hero, Moshe Rabbeinu. But it didn't happen that way. You came down and you built up all this false hope and you made the slavery worse. So now you're not only not the hero, you're the enemy in the end. And so Moshe's complaining. And personally, I always like at this point in time, if I was reading for the first time, I expect God to say, I know how you feel. I understand. I sympathize and I empathize. But just know it's all going to end well. God doesn't do that. On the contrary, he's harsh. He says to Moshe Rabbeinu, what? You're criticizing and you're complaining? Are you kidding me? I promised this to your ancestors and they trusted me and they believed me. In the Gemara, I always wrote this, the Gemara talks about this and God says, Chaval. They don't make them like they used to make them. That's what the Gemara basically says. It's too bad about the ancient ones that are lost. They don't make them like they used to make them. That's modern day terminology. What do you mean by that? Abraham, I promised him the land. Yet when it comes time to bury his beloved wife, he has to pay for the land at top dollar. Yitzchak, he's like everywhere he goes, he's got problems. He got to dig a well, they fill it up. They go, it's like, constantly, having, starting up with the Kedah, his life is not easy either. And of course, Yaakov, he's like got to deal with Lavan and Esav and Lavan and then Shechem and and then eventually Yosef being sold. And he says, Paro says, how old are you? He goes, yeah, I know. I look worn. Believe me, I haven't even lived as long as my ancestors, and I've lived 2 lives in the meantime. So that's why I look so old. Yeah, and yet they didn't question God. They didn't say to God, what's going on? Eo questioned God. What are you doing? What are you doing? And so God comes back and says, well, we'll get to that later on, but they don't, and you are witnessing, Moshe Rabbeinu, you are witnessing the redemption in full stride, the actualization of those promises I made to your ancestors, and you're complaining? Yes. How could you compare? So he had to pay top dollar to bury his wife. Big deal. So he didn't question you. Big deal. Yitzchak, right? His life, okay, but fine, but still, he looked, had a good life still. Good wife, good kid, one of them. Grandchildren, and Yaakov, he dies. The last 17 years of his life are with tranquility, and he has so many victories to his name. I'm not coming to you, God, on my behalf. This is not about me. This is about the Jewish people. They're suffering, and en masse. This is much worse. So clearly, I have a right to complain. And God says, no, you don't. This is exactly what we spoke about. I'm taking them out, and this is part of that process. So what am I doing here? Why'd you send me? What's the point? So, we'll have to see. Same idea. So the Gemara says, an interesting thing, the Gemara is not talking about this per se, but the Gemara says a very important concept, and idea that people should know. It talks about 2 people. One of them was really meant to be the Rosh Hashiva, but he wasn't chosen. Of one of the academies in Bavel, a different rabbi was chosen. He was a Rosh Hashiva for 22 years. At the end of 22 years, the other one became Rosh Hashiva. He waited, and the Gemara, he could have fought. He could have argued. They could have, those who supported him could have said, no, he's more worthy, because they discussed this, which one to choose. It's not like just a automatic reality. They don't. He just the Rabbi Yosef, says. They've chosen him. He's the one. And for 22 years, he wouldn't even accept any kind of chesed that might have been given to him because of his potential title, because of the greatness that he had. He treated himself like he was just any other rabbi at the time until he became Rosh Hashiva. Then it was a different story. And so the Gemara says, from this we learn a very important concept, that if a person pushes off the moment, they push the moment will push them off. And if a person allows himself to be pushed off by the moment, then the moment will be pushed off for them. Meaning, that if you try to make things happen before their time, now how do you know what's their time? Okay, 1 second, right? But if you try to make things happen before their time, then you'll end up being run over, steamrolled by whatever the event's going to be. It's not going to go well for you. Maybe in the beginning it might look like you're successful, but in the end somehow it's going to blow up in your face. But if you realize that no matter how much you want a certain result, but you realize this is not the time to say, to do whatever, and you allow yourself to be pushed off, somehow this will come back in your favor in the future. And you'll get what you needed, what you wanted, maybe even better. And you see this in life a lot of times. The people who don't have that sense of constraint, they allow themselves to say the thing that they need to say right now, but they kind of like, no, it's not the right time, and it blows up. It blows up. It makes the situation worse, not better. So you got it off your chest. Great. Now you have more on your chest to deal with. But the people who are smart enough to keep their peace, to bite their tongue, or not make that extra effort, not make that extra phone call they shouldn't make, not nudge somebody or try to make it a result that wasn't meant to be, then somehow later on they're not only vindicated, but they're celebrated because the moment it gets pushed off for them. That's very important advice that Rabbi Avin Halevi gives to all of us based upon this Gemara. And the question is it just like simple advice, or is this telling us something about history, about the world, how it works? So moving on to the next source, right? Because we'll have to tie this all together, B'ezras Hashem, hopefully by 15, right? This is what the pasuk in Tehillim says the following thing: go and see the works of God, God's done, awesome indeed towards mankind. And the actual word is alila. And we've spoken about alilas countless times in the past, but just to refresh your memory, that, for example, alila's dam is a blood libel. Dam is blood. Alila is like the libel. It's like a pretext. That's what the word basically means. There's a pretext that it's, conspiracies are made of these type of ideas where they make it look like this thing happened in its own right, but really it was just an excuse. Anti-Semitism, as people are pointing out today, for example, the war in Gaza did not create anti-Semitism. It only brought out anti-Semitism that was already there, that people wanted to be able to express, but they just necessarily yet completely politically correct. But the war just opened the door. Oh, now the anti-Semitism was already there. This just gave them an excuse, a pretext to be able to say, no, we're not anti-Semites, we're just anti-Israel. Well, take a look at the facts, you'll see it's not true. And this is a concept we find very much through the Midrashim and over here, as it says, right? The Midrash Tanchuma says the following thing: Adam Arishon said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed is He, the Bana Sha'olam, Master of the universe. The Torah was with you for 2,000 years before you even created the world. It wasn't created just before there was. God had this blueprint for creation long before creation was in existence, right? Yet it instructs. It says in Parshas Chukas, this is the law when a man will die in a tent. In other words, in Parshas Chukas, they're talking about the halachas of Tumah v'Tahara, purity and impurity. A dead body imparts impurity, and there's halachas. It comes in contact with certain vessels that they can't be brought to the temple, and you have to take them to the mikveh to toilet them. So complicated laws of Tumah v'Tahara, which we don't really hold right now because we're all in a state of impurity, so there's not much practical difference. But nevertheless, we do toivel, we do dip our kelim that are not made by Jews into a mikveh because of these laws of Tumah v'Tahara. So, and every shul pretty much has one, at least Orthodox shul, and it's talking about these laws. This is one of the source of these laws of kashrus and Tumah v'Tahara. And Adam says, I'm just going through Torah. Very great book, by the way. I really enjoy it. It's probably going to be a bestseller throughout history. But in the meantime, we haven't yet eaten from the Eitz Tov Hara, and there's no death in the world, but you're discussing death, and that's from 2,000 years ago, whatever that means. Right? So he says, if you have not already decided that death should be in creation, would you have written this? Rather, you were just looking for a pretext to blame death on me. The Medrash concludes, this is what is meant by awesome indeed, alila. What does this mean? Adam Arishim is complaining. God says to him, listen, all the trees in the Garden of Eden you can eat from, eat the dust of a ra, tree of knowledge, you can't. It's forbidden, at least for now, until I say otherwise. You should know, by the way, if you do, you're going to die. So it's not just like, don't do it because I don't like it. You're going to kill yourself. That's the result of eating from the Eitz Das Tov Ra. As it does anyhow. But that's what it says, right? And because of that, God says, now you're going to die, as if you hadn't eaten, you wouldn't have died. So again, it's like Yosef in jail, right? So if only Adam that what is it, 3-year-old? His mother says, don't take a cookie before supper, and he does anyhow. God said, which word didn't you understand? Do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, otherwise you shall die. So which one of these words were confusing to you? You didn't pick up on the message. He was such a high level. He wasn't a 3-year-old. He was greater than all of us put together. And yet he made this mistake. And everyone's baffled. And they're all running around trying to figure out explanations and giving this explanation, that explanation, and some are more fascinating and deeper than others. Bottom line, says the Medrash, because it had to happen. Because it had to happen. God wanted it to happen. Even though God framed it as if there was a way not for it to happen, the Medrash is saying clearly, wasn't going to go that way. And Adam understood this. Or at least what the Medrash is saying, that Adam understood the again, the further we go into all of this, the more the question of free will comes up over and over and over again. It says in Koheles Rabbah, it's brought down. There was a time for Adam HaRishon to enter Gan Eden, and a time for him to live there. There was a time for Noach to enter the ark, the Teva, and a time for him to leave it. There is meant to be a Mordechai, there's meant to be a Haman, there's meant to be an Esther, there's meant to be a Nebuchadnezzar, there's meant to, on and on. Everybody who has come into history and made their mark, either for good or for bad, was destined to come. We've been saying the entire time that towards the blueprint for creation. Anything that happens in history had to be in the blueprint. God knows now the future all the time. So there's no, and it makes perfect sense. It just doesn't make sense. That's all. It makes perfect sense without making sense. Meaning that it makes sense that all that's true, that God knows the future, and that everything is set in the master plan. The stories are written. The screenplay has all been edited at this point in time. But we don't understand yet how free will fits into all of this. I mean, there's some very basic answers. That just because God knows the future, just because He knows the outcome, and He's outside of time anyhow, he's a whole different being. So you can't even compare yourself to Him in any way. But just because He knows the future, just because He's even manipulating the events, as long as I don't know at the moment I'm making a choice about something, I mean, it's an amazing thing. Yirmiyahu says to the Jewish people, you're going to sin, you're going to get in trouble, and God's going to destroy the temple. You hear a warning like that? If your doctor says to you, keep eating like that, and you're going to have a heart attack, you won't be able to do anything, and you're probably going to die young. So you wait to find out what's going to happen? Yeah, so a lot of people do ignore it. As long as you feel good, right? Like I said to the stroke, you can feel perfectly fine, and pitam, all of a sudden it happens. So somehow, even though all of this was predicted, and they even were told the answers to the test in advance, at the moment of choice, because the Yetzer Hara plays a role in all this too, that's a big factor, somehow they misread the situation. Somehow they didn't realize that this was that. Let me give an example. Perfect example is a great example. I think it's one of the best examples of all. The Torah tells us that God promised at least 2,000 years ago. Now, the Torah we know, we're believers. It came from Mount Sinai. The Torah is 3,300 and some odd years old. We know that God spoke at Mount Sinai. The Torah comes from there. But if you don't believe in that, you're still working that issue through. You at least know that the Torah is 2,000 years old because Christianity, is 2,000 years old, and they built upon the Bible. They built upon the Old Testament, the Torah. They got the exact same thing, word for word. And they just went with it and they adopted it and adapted it to make their own religion of the whole thing. So at least Josephus is talking about it and writing about it and saying that we all believe back then that was from God Mount Sinai, but 2,000 years old. And the Torah is making a prophecy, a remarkable prophecy. You're going to go to the four corners of the world. Okay, so that part to work out because yours not square, but it's figurative, of course, right? Although I was told recently there's still some people arguing that the world is flat. Okay, whatever gets you. But this is what the Torah is telling you. You're going to go to the four corners of the earth, and we haven't even left Europe yet, by the way, and we haven't left Israel for that matter. The Romans were still in Eretz Israel, but I will gather you in from those four corners at the end of days. That is the most absurdly remarkable prophecy to make, because how could you possibly know that's going to happen, and how could you even promise it if you don't know for sure it's going to become true? Because the moment it doesn't come true, everyone's going to know that retroactively was all false. You can only make a prophecy, you would only dare to make a prophecy like that if you were God, and you could make it, you could guarantee it, because for God it's already happened. And here we are, the last 200 years, remarkably, this prophecy has been coming true right before our very eyes, under our nose, in the nose of the world. It's like literally a fulfillment of a phenomenal fulfillment of a phenomenal prophecy. And yet, how many people see it and acknowledge it and are running back saying, look, the prophecy is coming true. God's bringing the redemption. Let's go back. We don't want to be left behind. No. Oh, yeah, Jews make, oh, yeah, fine. We got the land back because the UN and we wars and, and Jews are going back. I don't want to, but they do. So let them go. Teach us on. I mean, incredible. So even though the Torah told us this is going to happen, and there's a prophecy, and it's telling you the future, and you're getting to witness it before your very eyes, you see how you still have room for choice. You still have room for free will. So it's not a steer, it's not a contradiction, it doesn't interfere, but that's a separate issue for the time being. Next source, okay? The Gemara says that we learn from Yosef, because Yosef, he went down to Egypt, even though we know, because we're seeing the shorter version of the story happens very, boom, 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 right? He's born, he tells the stories about his dreams, they sell him, goes to Egypt, goes to jail, gets up, he gets viceroy, they come down to Egypt looking for food. All in a matter of 15 minutes. That's how long it takes to read all the psukim. And that's not what happened. It took a long time. There were years in between. And even though Yosef went down to Egypt and he became a slave and then became a prisoner and then became viceroy of Egypt, from the Chumash and Parshas Miketz, you see he didn't see it as the fulfillment of his dreams yet. He wasn't saying, oh, this is my dream coming true. I can't wait to see when my brothers come down and bow down before me and fulfill that part of the dream too. He didn't see that. He just figured this was his life. He got out, miraculously, remarkably, and became, second in command over Egypt and all, absolutely. But he didn't see it as his dreams coming true until his brothers came down looking for food and bowed down to him. And the Torah says he remembered his dreams. He had forgotten about them, but he remembered them. And the Gemara says, because 22 years is a long time, and the Gemara learns from this that a person should wait at least 22 years before you say, that dream didn't come true. It's a waste of time. Wasn't real. The Gemara says, no, don't do that. For 22 years, you can't do that. Because Yosef waited for 22 years, and his dreams come true. So not everyone should wait for 22 years for their dreams to come true. That's quite a tall order. Most people don't. You have a dream, you expect it to come true sometime in the next 15 minutes, 15 days, whatever. But how many dreams do you remember from a year ago? Even the great dreams, the best dreams, the dreams, I found $1 million, I won the lottery. How many dreams? First of all, the way dreams work, the way the brain works, is that the dreams happen in the part of the brain that does not allow for short-term memory, that you can remember it, when you wake up. It just literally passes through. So unless you wake up in the middle of a dream, which it becomes part of your consciousness, on the spot, then you're not going to remember most of your dreams. So even if you do remember a dream when you first wake up in the morning, I can't remember dreams from a week ago. I can't even remember dreams from 2 days ago. They just like air, vanish like that. And so I'm supposed to wait for 22 years until those dreams were prophecy. Okay, so prophecy is prophecy. I understand, but the Gemara is talking the time of Tanaim. This is after prophecy. They're still doing miracles, but nonetheless, So late in history, it's closer to us than to them. And yet the Gemara is telling us 22 years. That's a long time to wait for a dream to come true. And more than likely, if any of my dreams have come true after 22 years, I forgot I had them and I didn't realize this is the dream coming true. So again, what does the Gemara mean by this? Anyhow, so after Moshe complains to God, God says to Moshe, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a mighty hand he will send them out, and with a mighty hand he will drive them out of his land. And from this, it's like God saying, this is all part of that. It's the exact opposite, but it's all part of it. Like what you're seeing happen to your people that you're complaining about, where they're like the ones being beaten and made to suffer, this is all going to flip over onto Paro, and they're going to be the ones with Yad Rama on top, and he'll be the one on the bottom. And that's the way, for that to happen, this has to happen. It's all part of the master plan. And of course, we say every morning in davening, right? Many are the thoughts of man, but as the plan of, again, what do these things mean? It means that God has a master plan, and either you get with it or you don't get with it. And we go even further. The Gemara says 6,000 years, the history will last 6,000 years, 2,000 years of chaos, 2,000 years of Torah, 2,000 years are the days of Mashiach. If in Mashiach, you must Mashiach, history's already been divided up. That's the way it has to happen. And Rabbi Kiva thought Bar Kochba, because he had qualifications to be Mashiach, and might have been, if he had only said Mashiach ben Yosef, then he would have been okay. But he then started to claim that he's Mashiach ben David, and as a result of that, the Gra says he was killed for being a false prophet, because Mashiach ben David is supposed to be a prophet, and he wasn't. So, again, and then there's the period of resurrection, and all these time limits are given. The bottom line to all of these sources, and there's still so many more to go through. The bottom line is we see that God has this master plan for history and everything that's going on, right down to this war, the most current war with Hamas, and the kidnapped Israelis were the ones who were freed, the ones who were not freed. Every last detail. None of this is accidental. The Holocaust wasn't accidental. There's no such thing as accident by God. It's hard to believe. It's hard to fathom, and we have difficulty because we live in such closed realities. Like we didn't see the Holocaust coming. Otherwise, we would have run. Anti-Semitism has been around for thousands of years. It gets worse, better. People thought that somehow they could weather it. 100,000 Jews, 100,000 German Jews had the chance to leave Germany between 1933 and 1939 and chose to remain, because they thought they could weather the storm. If they knew that the Holocaust was coming, they would have gone, like the other 60,000 that left during that time period instead. It's hard to get used to this idea because we like to believe that, that everything's kind of spontaneous, just like evolving. Somehow God knows the future, but there's still room for history to evolve. And if there isn't, if the events that are going to happen, then what difference does it make? If someone is going to die anyhow, they're sick, the doctors have said there's no hope for this person. So why should I daven for a miracle? Why should they ask God to change the situation? So many times they do that. They die anyhow. And what about the war? Why daven? Why say Tehillim? Why help the people? Why do all the tzedakah? Why any of it? What difference do we make to the situation? Kol b'di shemayim, chutz me'ir shemayim. Everything's in the hands of heaven except the fear of God. So then I can't affect the results. I get despondent and disappointed. Mistake. It's a Yetzer Hara. There is a concept, a very important concept. The Gemara brings down, and it brings it down kind of like incidentally, kind of like by the way, but it's not by the way. It's probably one of the most important ideas anyone can live by, but specifically a Jew can live by. The Gemara says, it brings down really three examples, 3 or 4 examples, 2 for good and 2 for bad. The Gemara says that really the halacha, well, first of all, Pinchas. What Pinchas did by killing Cosby and Zimri, Moshe knew the halacha. Moshe would have done it. He knew the halacha about being an avenger of God, and he would have done it, but God made him forget the halacha. Why? To leave the door open for Pinchas. Why? Why Pinchas? Why not Moshe? But not slachad. Come and they ask a question about inheritance. What about in the case where a man dies and has no sons? What about the daughters and the land that they're supposed to get as part of their Yerusha? What do? The Gemara says Moshe knew the halacha. He's made to forget it, so the halacha could be taught through them. And they're mentioned. I mean, to be mentioned, 5 daughters of Tzlachad mentioned in the Chumash 3, 4, 5 times. Such an honor. It's incredible. On the other hand, there's Korach, right? There's other people who are mentioned for bad. Bad things happen. The mouth opening up, the mouth of the earth opening up. So Gemara says we have this concept. The concept is megalgalin schus al yedei zakai, the thriugh al yedei chayav, which means in simple language that God gives the merit to the merit worthy, and He gives the opposite, the demerit, to those who are chayiv, those who are unworthy, those who have made themselves worthy of punishment and judgment and things like that. In other words, I guess the best way to sum it up is the miklat. The miklat, right? The accidental murderer, the guy who kills purposely, but there's no witnesses for either one. So God brings them both to the same hotel where the accidental murderer is climbing the ladder while the person who killed intentionally is walking underneath it. The ladder breaks because God makes the ladder break, and this person falls accidentally on the person below. He doesn't know he's a murderer because no one caught him. The guy dies, but now he's an accidental murderer a second time. But this time they're witnesses. He has to run to the miklat as per the halacha. So the guy who supposed to get killed, he got killed, not through Beis Din, but through an accident, an incident. And the guy who's supposed to go to the miklat, he goes because God's the master shadchan. He's making shidduchim all the time, not just between husbands and wives, but also between people and events. So when the Gemara says megalgalin schus al yedei zakai, it means that God already knows what He wants to do and what He wants to bring about. There are going to be Yeshuas, and there's going to be the opposite, as we have witnessed and seen and lived through over the last few months. It's hard to believe we're like 3 months away from that, that what took place. But this is what was planned from day one. There are going to be Yeshuas, there are going to be redemptions, there are going to be salvations, there are going to be people whom the doctors are going to say they're going to die because medicine cannot cure them. And the way this thing usually goes is death. But God says, I'm going to do an 11th hour salvation for this person because they're not meant to die at that time. But everybody thinks they are. So God says, since this person has developed a heart in them, they've either learned Torah, they worked on themselves, done Musar, but they've made themselves into a sensitive, caring person who wants to help other people. It's so important to them. Now, every time they do this, whether they succeed or they fail, they go to say to him, and the person dies anyhow. It doesn't affect your schar in the world to come, and that's really the bottom line of the whole cheshbon. Getting schar in the world to come. That's the end of the story. So everything you do good anyhow, whether you're successful, the results or not, you're going to get the schar automatically. But it's better than that. It's even better than that. God, that alone is generous. Super generous. We don't appreciate that now because we have the Geula. We expect so much more from life. If we understood what we're actually getting, then we'd be so much more grateful for what God is giving to us. But He goes even one step further. This is beautiful. This is what the Gemara is trying to allude to. God says, He said, if you're going to make yourself into somebody who wants to help, who wants to have a positive impact on people in life, who wants to be a partner with me in the fulfillment of creation, that's who you're making yourself. That's what concerns you. That's your mabat, your perspective. That's your attitude. That's who you are. I got something for you. This person over here, who's meant to look like they're going to die, but is going to be saved at the last second, I will make you a governor for them, so that when they're saved, not only will it look as if your tefillah has made a difference, I will treat them as if they did. Where do we see this? Because Because first of all, the Jewish people finished building the Mishkan, and they bring all the parts to Moshe Rabbeinu. And they said to Moshe Rabbeinu, we can't build it. Why not? Okay, Kabbalah, whatever. No, we can't build it. So Moshe says to God, they brought the whole thing to me. So God says, yeah, I know. He says, you put it together, erect it, make it, put the Mishkan together. And 600,000 people couldn't do it. How can I do it? God says, of course you can't do it. But that's not the issue. You allowed everybody else to build everything else. I want this Mishkan to be built by you. I'm going to build it. You just put your hands in the proper place, and make it look like you're doing the work. And I will even give you credit, because I don't need the credit. I don't need everyone to know that I did it. I just need them to acknowledge that in their mind and be real with that. I'll be humble about it. But I will even give you the credit as if you, in fact, saved that person's life and built the Mishkan. The funny thing is that long before I saw any of this, long before I heard any of this, I actually heard a story that basically taught me the same idea. It was actually a beautiful story from my Rosh Yeshiva. My Rosh Yeshiva was Rav Noach Weinberg Tzitzel, I mentioned before. And he's somebody who was a very successful individual, especially in the world of Kiruv, outreach. He was also very humble person. He was a lover of Hashem. I mean, I got so much out of that. He was an evidence. He gave his life to Hashem. There are not a lot of people in the world who have been so devoted to doing God's work and on behalf of his people. And he was, but everything by him, because of that, always came down to outreach. No matter where he spoke and what he spoke about, doesn't make a difference. Somehow he was able to bring it back to the importance of doing outreach. And he was actually talking at a Sheva Brochas of one of the people in the yeshiva, because the yeshiva often would make a Sheva Brochas for the family for lunch. The whole yeshiva would come, and very nice. And Rav Noach was speaking about the couple. But he brought it back to Kiruv. I don't remember the connection at this point. I just remember the story because that's what stuck with me. But he was talking about how he once came. He and his brother came from Slonomer Hasidim at one point in time. If you know Rav Noach and Rav Yaakov Weinberg, they were not Hasidish at all. They became very, very Litvisher, to say the least. But they still had tons of family that were Slonomers. And so at family simchas, they would be, they would be there with all the family, all the Slonomer Hasidim. It was a very chashuv group of Hasidim. And Rav Noach was relating how at one of the simchas, one of his cousins or nephew, I think his cousins, came up to him and said, I'm paraphrasing it over here, said, Noach, he said, we have illustrious ancestors in the grave, Rebbes, great people, right, who did great things, but they didn't make one Baal Tshuva. Not one person became religious that they knew of, maybe one, but that they knew of at the time. But tell me about you, that you've made hundreds, maybe even thousands of Baal Tshuva. He says, what was the schus? What was the merit? And Rav Noach, in his classic humble style, said, imagine the following thing. A man gets off the boat in New York, right? He's from Europe, a small town. It's back in the 50s before he understood all this technology. Today it's very hard not to know the technology, but in those days it was very easy not to know it. He comes off the boat, he's in New York, and he can't believe what he's seeing, all the buildings going up and everything. He looks down the street and he sees this big, huge load of bricks in the air. And there's a foreman with his hand underneath the bricks. And he thinks that foreman is carrying the bricks with one hand, not even two hands, with one hand. And he's shocked. So he runs down the street to see how it's possible. By the time he gets there, the bricks have been put down on the ground. And he runs up to the foreman in his broken English. And he says, how are you able to do that? Do what? How are you able to carry all those bricks and with one hand yet? He says, what are you talking about? I saw you, one hand on the bricks, and you put them down over here. I said, no, I didn't. I said, well, what happened? He said, see that big wire? It goes up and it's attached to that big metal arm over there, right? He said, that is what carried the bricks. That's called a crane. And it carried the bricks. I just put my hand underneath it, and it looked like I was carrying the bricks, but I was just nothing at all. I didn't make a difference at all to the situation. So he answered his cousin by saying, he said, when our ancestors lived, Hashem was not yet making Bali Tshuva. It wasn't the time in history. You think that Hashem always wants Bali Tshuva, always wants to, yet we don't know his plan. We don't know his plan. Menashe is born from Chizkiah, who's almost Mashiach. And Menashe turns the country to Avodah Zarah for 22 years. And Hashem did that. Hashem made it happen. Why? Why would Hashem make something so despicable as Avodah Zarah happen through a Jew who maybe wouldn't have done it if he wasn't being compelled? But we don't know. We don't know. We don't know. These are questions. With lots of questions. Take out your pads and Olam Haba. We'll have a ton of questions to ask about. But that time, anyhow, the questions will all disappear because we'll see what creation was about, history was about. Everything will make sense. Even the Holocaust will make sense to us. So imagine a thing like that. Not now. Not yet. So we have these questions. He said, but in our generation, Hashem has decided, Higiyazman, it's the time to make Bali Tshuva. All I did was stick my hand underneath the load of bricks, so to speak, picked up the beams of the Mishkan. God did all the work, but he made it look like I was the one doing it, that I am the one doing it. And that's the way it looked. And he got the credit for doing it because that's what he's doing. But if you understand what got him to that point, if you read the story, now there's a book published on about his life and all that, and Rabbi Schuster too. So it's all, people like tzaddikim who gave their lives up to Klal Yisrael. And you read, I mean, everybody wants to see what they were like when they were younger. What was pushing them? What their burning desire they had. Reb Noach didn't just simply one day say, okay, I think I'll go into outreach, and did it. A lot of people do that, and they just become teachers. They just become, they don't have a major dramatic effect on the Jewish people. But people like Reb Noach, Zatzal, who were like, no, it's either program or pogrom. That was his motto, program or pogrom. If we don't have a program to bring back Jews, got to bring a pogrom to bring back Jews. And we've seen that over and over again. That was his schus. So Kosh Baruch Hu was megalgaling that schus and put him and plugged him in to outreach, and all the other people who had the same type of drive, who were doing the same type of thing and the same whatever, and all through history, and the Pinchases and the Bnei Tzlachad, that's where our free will makes a difference. We have to make ourselves into somebody that we can turn to Kosh Baruch Hu and say, I've made myself into somebody who wants to save people's lives. I want to have an impact where I can save people who are meant to die. I don't want them just to die. I don't want them just to give up and just go like that. I just say, can't make a difference anyhow. I want to be a partner with you in redemption. I want to be one of your partners. I want to do things that are going to help you, so to speak, bring about the fulfillment of the prophecies you've made in the Torah. I want to be that. That's I'm making myself into that kind of a person. So God said, okay. First of all, you get schar for doing that anyhow. And that's in the world to come. That's where all this history is going to be over. It's going to be gone, forgotten about. It's all over. It's just a means to an end. That is eternal. But then God goes one step further and says, okay, good. I got a job for you. I know exactly where to put you. And he puts a person there and start an organization, Nefesh B'Nefesh. We start an organization, over here that saves people's lives, or statistics to soldiers, or whatever it is that's furthering the cause of Geula was going to happen anyhow. It's all meant to happen. But Megalgalin Schus Idei Zakai, Kosh Baruch Hu will find the people. He knows where they are. He has their address, who have made themselves into the kind of people to have that kind of impact. He'll plug them in, and then he'll give you the credit for having done it as if it wouldn't have happened without you. That's how you answer the questions.
Okay, Rabbi. Thank you very much. That was very deep and amazing, and we are very convinced. I'm very convinced that nothing happens without Hashem's prior knowledge and planning and everything else. But we had a question last week that was, what can make us feel? You said don't stop doing what you're doing because you're getting schar from Olam Haba. But what about in this world? Is there anything?
That's just it. The whole last part was not about that part. The whole last part was about that in a sense, it doesn't make a difference what the results are. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't.
It doesn't. But we want to feel like we're making a difference. We want to feel like we are furthering the cause of helping the soldiers or helping displaced people or bringing the Geula or what I'm hearing, and I'm not hearing this correctly, is that great, I'll get a lot of credit later on in another world, but what about, am I doing anything to help what's going on now?
So let me ask you a question. Did Moshe get credit for building the Mishkan?
Yeah.
He didn't build it.
He put it together and took it apart. I mean,
Hashem. No, he didn't. Hashem built it and took it apart. That's what it says. Hashem built it and took it apart. Did Moshe get credit did the Mishkan make a difference to the Jewish people?
I'm not talking about credit. I'm talking about do we
Wait. Did the Mishkan make a difference to the Jewish people?
Yes, he made a huge difference to the Jewish people.
Yes. And so Moshe made a big difference to the Jewish people because he built the Mishkan?
No, that wasn't the reason. He was their leader.
But I'm saying in terms of the Mishkan. If the Mishkan made a big difference to the Jewish people, and Moshe built them, if someone says, this house that we're living in saved our lives, and you built it, thank you so much. And the person says, well, I didn't really build, God built it for you, because God was, I know, but nonetheless, I saw you take your hands and put the bricks and pay the money and all that. But he says, yeah, I know, but if it wasn't for God, I couldn't do any of that. God, he inspired me, he connected us, but we see, and then God says, not only that, but because you're so humble, I will act as if you, in fact, built that house on your own without me at all. That's what God says.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I got that.
the only difference, the real question you're asking, if you realize it, the real question you're asking is if this is the way things run, so what practical differences does information make to my life? Because if we're saying at the end of the day that if I'm not gonna save somebody, and by the way, this is what Yosef says to his brothers in last week's parsha. I can't save somebody God wants to kill, and I can't kill somebody God wants to save.
Okay.
Can you save a person through Tehillim who's meant to die?
Well, according to what you're saying, no.
Let me cut what I'm saying.
No, but this is the teaching out there. This is what people think. They think if I only said more to Hillel, that person might have lived. People think that. You know that.
Let's just deal with the question, okay? What people think and know are two different things. They know all kinds of wrong things. Just ask the question. Can you say someone is meant to die at a certain date, a certain time? And it's nigzer from Shemaim. So what happened? God says, wow, I didn't count upon these people davening so hard. Now I got to go save the guy's life. Ugh, I got to rewrite history. His wife is going to be an almana. Now she's not going to be, which means she's no. I got to redo the whole thing because people died a little bit too much. They died a little bit too much. Is that what's going on? No. Can I save somebody who's meant to die, or can I kill somebody who's meant to live? There's a reason why that we have all these fantastic stories where people say, I was almost killed, but this thing happened the last second, right? If it wasn't for this bus that went up at the bar, this guy would have seen me, would have been shot, and lo and behold, because of this thing, how many stories you put that happened down in the South, right? Because they did this, because they did that, this happened like this, like that. They didn't get killed. Right, there's a guy caught in the bathroom. The two girls, and he took refuge in the bathroom. These portable bathrooms, right? And the Arabs come along, they shoot them all full of bullets. And the soldiers go by one, they find some empty, they find some people dead inside them. They get to one of them, there's a guy inside there, crouched down with the two girls, and the soldiers are amazed that they weren't shot. How did you not get shot? And he goes ahead and tells a story, right, that he just started keeping Shabbos, and he got a photograph as event. It's a big deal for him that he had a moral dilemma. A lot of Baal Tshuva have a difficult time in the beginning to stay true to, it takes time to get really solid with this type of thing. And he goes there and he makes a job, Shabbos, and all of a sudden this happens. And of course, what does he do? He's there talking to God in the bathroom, right? Saying to God, I'm so sorry I did this. If you let me live and let me be saved, I will keep every Shabbos after this. That's Kach Shemati. That's the story I heard, right? He died, and God said, oh, well, since you said that, I'm going to let you live now, and now change all of history because of it? Did God not know from day one that he was going to do this? Was it not in the cards from the beginning? Did God not, who's above time, not already see this guy in the bathroom, put him in the bathroom, and made, say this type of a thing for whatever reason? Yes. But look at it. Happens, stands things. But a series of coincidence events that just happened to happen that saved this person's life or killed persons. Sometimes people died because they took a flight they weren't supposed to take, but for some reason there was change, and we say, "Oh, what bad luck!" A guy almost endured the Twin Towers. He was supposed to get in the airplane, and fly with everybody else, and he saw these Arabs in the place in some seats, and they don't know each other, but he saw them talking to each other and arguing in the lobby. So he says to the stewardess, "There's something wrong here." This is before terrorism was doing something. They didn't take it seriously. So he said something's wrong here because these guys all were arguing in the lobby, in the boarding area, and now they're acting like they're strangers to me. You should check it out. They were just looking. She said, "No, it's nothing." And she told him to take a seat. He said, "I'm getting off the plane." He got off the plane, and of course he survived, and everybody else died. So he was the only one who saw this, and he saw it, but didn't question. How many times in your life do you see something that says that's weird, and you say to yourself, "What if I had done?" And you wonder. But the bottom line is that if you're saved, it's because that's what has to happen. So then again, back to the original question. So then, what's really going on here? So God, and if you think about it, by the way, it's the only way it can be. Because we're just human beings, and the whole world exists inside of God. So everything, by definition, anyhow, is just Him and His thoughts and His reality. The real question is how do we exist, and are even in a position to make it look like we make a difference? All that matters. All that matters. So we become so result oriented because we live amongst Esav, right? Esav, the Greeks, all of them, you know what they said? You have to be a perfect human specimen. You have to get A+ on your exams. You have to graduate with honors. You have to become a top lawyer, a top doctor. Everything is all focused on the result, and to such an extent, by the way, that we'll do a whole article on some CEO because of what he's done in the business world, even though he's a lousy husband, father, and citizen. We don't care. Doesn't matter to us. The main thing is he succeeded in business in an amazing way. That's what all that counts. There's lots of people like that. And we'll even yell at people who say, "No, but he's a lousy human being." No, I don't care. He's a great businessman. That's what we're all talking about right now. Because that's Esav. Esav's world is completely result oriented. That's not the Jewish people. The Jewish people, the less you ask the question, why did Rabbi Akiva and the other martyrs simply use bitachon to escape their danger? They could have. Rabbi Akiva didn't have to die the way he died. He could have trusted in God as he was capable of doing, and God would have had him go to sleep and die in his sleep peacefully. Why didn't he use bitachon to save himself? He says because these people on their level prefer a different midah, the midah of mesiras nefesh, self-sacrifice. You know what it means? They turn to God and say, "God, I am yours. Do with me as you will." That's what the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says. Make your will like His will, so His will be like your will. In other words, you know what the real point of free will is? To get to the point where you no longer care about anything but doing His will. That's all that counts. Saving, dying, saving the world, being a hero. All those are just the things you see on the outside. We see on the outside. What's really going on with Pinchas? What's really going on with Blas Lachad? What's going on with Moshe Benu and all these people is that they said, "God, I know somebody who every day they daven Shemona Esrei. I've spoken to people about these ideas, and we share ideas and like that. And you pick up things along the way from other people's advice and all that. There's one guy I know every time he davens. He davens from Shema Kolenu. Let me be your partner in redemption. Let me be your partner in the rectification of creation. I'm yours. Tell me what to do. That's my life. I'm married. I have children. Yeah, I have responsibilities, and I'll take care of those, right? But overall, what I want, I'm yours. Plug me in. That's the level we're all supposed to get to. The rest is all God's. It's all God's. It's all God's. So the only question that we have to know at the end of the day is not whether we save someone's life or we kill them, God forbid. That's not the question. That's not the answer we need to understand. The only thing we know is that I do what I'm capable of doing. to try to save this person's life, to try to be the hero to save the war, to try to learn the Gemara I was trying to learn, to try to, do the chesed. Did I do my best? And when God sees you trying so hard to do that, he'll plug into situations where it will actually result in the results you're looking for, even though they're going to happen anyhow. Doesn't make a difference. God says, from my perspective, it's like they wouldn't have. And therefore, you get credited.
Okay, that clarifies things a lot for me. Thank you so much, Rabbi. And you should have a blessed
it's a very big conversation, a difficult discussion. It's not the end of it. It's not the end of it.
No, it's not the end of it. We need to speak more about this, and we really appreciate you taking your time explaining all this. So everybody, thank you, Rabbi Pinchas Winston. And don't forget to check his website. He's got two websites, www.sharnunproductions.org and his original, www.36.org, where you can read all his multiple books, over 50, maybe 60 books by now, on everything, current issues, traditional Jewish perspective.
105.
What? I'm sorry, I have an old piece of paper here. I guess it's a month old, this paper. Read his Parsha Shavua. You can sign up for his Parsha in your mailbox, reincarnation, end of days, Geula Barachmin, and much, much, much more. Thank you so much, Rabbi, for joining us. And please, Hashem, give us a safe and happy Shabbos and keep our soldiers safe and our learners safe for our yeshiva and our soldiers safe on the field, and bring the hostages home. And whether we bring them or not ourselves, we have to keep trying anyway, because we know we have a part in this. We do have a part in this. It's very important what we do.
Absolutely. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.